Welcome to the Modern Woodworkers Association podcast, where our mission is to provide woodworking education for all levels and all types of woodworkers. To find out more about the Modern Woodworkers Association, visit us on the web at modernwoodworkersassociation.com or follow us on Twitter at MWA_national. Now to our host, Tom Iovino, Diami Plotke, and yours truly, Chris Adkins.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 72nd edition of the Modern Woodworkers Association online discussion about all things woodworking. Today's special guest is Zac Higgins, but before we get to him, let me introduce our panel of experts tonight. And I don't know if you can count them as experts in anything, except for babbling on an audio podcast. I'm Tom Iovino of Tom'sWorkbench.com, and I'll be your host for the program. Joining me from the lovely confines of Long Island, New York, is Diami Plotke. Diami, how you doing?
Good evening, Tom. How are you?
Lovely. So unable to join us tonight is Chris Adkins from Hotlanta, Georgia.
Yeah, I think he melted.
I'm sure he's out enjoying the peaches. And also joining us from the lovely state of, not the Commonwealth, but the state of Nevada, is Zac Higgins. Zac, how you doing?
Good. Very good.
You're going to be our special guest for this program, aren't you?
Well, I'm special, that's for sure.
That's good. I'm glad to see you ride the short bus to the workshop.
That's
so,
right.
What we're going to do is we're going to start out with what's in the shop this week. Diami, can you tell us what I'm looking at in the show notes right now, please?
Well, in the show notes, you're looking at three little triangles of this really, I don't know if figured is the right word, but I'm going to call it figured walnut. It's a crotch of some sort. You can see the branches coming out.
It's a family show.
It's just got this wonderful grain pattern. So I'm making a trophy for a friend of mine. It's a some sort of sports thing trophy. I'm really into it. And the trophy itself is 3 tiers of walnut with beer bottles spray painted gold to make them as tacky as possible, to make the pillars between the different tiers, and then it gets a beer mug at the very top. So that's the wood component, and I got it cut out and cut to shape. What I realized, though, is that the topmost piece, which is the small little triangle, it's probably too small. As I put the crowning mug on it to try it out, I actually bought a hole saw bit because I want to make a little recess to sit the mug in.
So it won't slide off.
Yeah, and the hole saw is basically kissing the edges of the 3 sides, so I think I may have to remake the small component of it, but that's what's going on in the shop. Not all that much, quite frankly. I don't think I've been in the shop in about a week and a half.
Really? Time for you to get out there.
Yeah, well, today I was in the shop, but I was running networking cable, and I didn't actually touch a real tool.
The sacrifices you make for the Modern Woodworkers Association podcast.
What's going on in your shop, Tom?
Oh, gosh, that's a good question. We're still in the middle of Project Hope Chest number 3. What have I been doing? Gosh, this past weekend I got so much work done on it. I got panels put together with frames, and everything glued up, and it's now standing.
It looks great. I thought it was actually done when I saw that picture.
Well, yeah, it's close. I mean, I just have to, obviously there's finishing that goes on with this now. But it's also, I have to put in the bottom and just work on the lid and kind of finesse some of the details a little bit. But I've got the hinges in house, and I've got the finish in house, and I just need to start the finishing process on it. For those of you who may have been following Tom'sWorkbench.com, the blog, a couple weeks ago I was hand planing, and I actually had a little tear out problem.
We talked about that in the last podcast.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I did. The grain on cherry is just some really tricky stuff sometimes. And I was planing, and I thought I could, just kind of do it all with hand planes. I wouldn't have to worry about anything. And then there was a big, giant tear out on the face side. And I thought to myself, gosh, if only I had a belt sander. And then I thought to myself, I did. So what I did was I took my my trusty handy-dandy belt sander, and what I did was I actually sanded the piece down, just ever so carefully. Took my time and went very carefully with it. And now it's in its rough phase, but it's nice and flat.
Now, Tom,
that's the beauty about it.
Couple questions about that. You mentioned in your post about it that you went cross grain with the sander.
Yes.
my only real experience with a belt sander is working on floors. So when you're sanding the top with it, why cross grain versus diagonal versus with the grain? What's the impact on grain direction versus the sanding?
The funny thing is we've been to a lot of hand planing lectures, Diami, you and I know
too many.
if you don't plug in the tool, you don't use it. I understand that. But some of these experts we've had on in the past guys like Chuck Bender and Chris Schwartz and folks like that. One of the things they recommend that you do is you plane across the grain.
And that I understand, but you're sanding.
So I sanded across the grain. I figured, if the same physics apply.
Okay.
So I figured I would do that. And what I did was I drew pencil lines across it. And I went across the grain, which actually was very good because it was a shorter dimension. So by going in that shorter dimension, instead of trying to make long strokes along the whole piece, I was able to just go in that shorter dimension, and the piece sanded up beautifully. Now, of course, I'm going to have to sand with the grain when I start that second part of the finishing, and then I'm going to random orbit sand it, and then get the scraper out, get a scraper nice and sharp, and just do that to hit it, just kiss it like that. And really, this top's really going to be nice, and I've been talking about doing an inlay, and I know my niece isn't listening to this because she has more important things to do with her life than listen to her 46-year-old.
What else would a 15-year-old girl do?
Seriously. She's 16 now, so I'm already looking. What happened was when they were living in their house in Maryland, they had 3 trees in the front yard, and my niece Katie and her sister Lauren and her brother Michael all had their own trees identified. So. They climb up in them, and they play all kinds of crazy kid games. Well, Katie's tree was a Bradford pear that was too close to the sidewalk, and the roots started to heave the sidewalk. So they had to cut it down. Oh. And my brother-in-law had the smarts to cut out a section from the trunk. And what he did was he actually saved that section for all these years since they had to cut it down. And what he did was he gave it to me. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut a piece of inlay from that tree in the shape of a heart and inlay it into the lid of the chest. So
that's pretty cool.
So when she asked what is it, I'm going to say it's from her tree. So, that's really going to be, that's the kind of thing, if she doesn't cry, she doesn't have emotions. She's a robot at that point. So that's going to be a pretty big deal when that unveiling happens. So I just have to finish up, I think one more weekend and maybe a few nights in the shop, and I should be pretty darn close, if not done. And then what we'll have to do is Katie's sister Lauren is actually coming to the University of Tampa in the fall. So I think they're planning a road trip down just to kind of get her situated. And then we'll be able to do the unveiling. And then because it's kind of like a tab together kind of piece, it's not a dovetail or anything like that. It's kind of a tongue and groove piece. I could flat pack it and ship it back with my brother-in-law. He could just assemble it at the house.
Okay. So
it's just going to be just tab A and a slot B and put the bottom in and everything will be fine. So
this way, when it's all done, if there are any flaws, it's because Dad put it together wrong.
Yeah, because my brother-in-law Larry did it as opposed to me. So I can blame everything on Larry at that point, and it'll be perfect. Uncle Tom built a beautiful chest, and then my brother-in-law messed it up. So I've got the perfect Dow.
It sounds good.
You see, somebody's got to have one, right? And Zach, what's going on in your shop these days?
Oh, man. I got casting going on and turning. Right, this week I got an order for a bunch of pens. Forgot about that. Bunch of pens. I'm making a couple carbide tool handles for somebody, and then I'm doing a lot of casting.
Now, what do you mean casting? Are you talking like fly fishing? What are you doing?
No, like resin casting. So it's similar to, think about 2-part epoxy. Mm-hmm. That's a resin you could cast with, especially the West system. Pretty expensive way to go, but I use a thing that's a brand called Alumilite, and it's a polyurethane resin. A lot of people use polyester resin, but basically what you're doing is you're mixing these two things, and you can add color, you can dump wood in it, do whatever, and most of the stuff that I make out of them are like pens, so they're like, I make turning blanks out of it.
Well, we're gonna get a lot more information about this when we start talking and do the interview. So we don't want to give away everything, but
not everything.
So you got like the pen order, you got the turning. So you're a busy guy.
Yeah, pretty busy.
Who knew?
I didn't know.
Well, neither did I. So that makes two of us. All right. Now, before we get into the interview with Zac, Diami, there's a couple of things going on that we need people to be aware of, right?
There are a couple things going on.
Okay.
Coming up in May is Weekend with Wood, and I was just on the website just a few minutes ago getting the information for the show notes, and Weekend with Wood is sold out.
Hey, check it out.
Yeah, so if you were looking to go to Weekend with Wood, you'll have to go next year.
Yeah.
But that's coming up in May.
And that's pretty cool because that's right there at Meredith Publishing's headquarters in Des Moines, Iowa. It's right there where Wood Magazine's published.
Exactly.
So all the shots inside the shops where they're building the projects for the magazine, you get to see them and you get to see the editors. It's really a cool thing. So we definitely want to interview some folks who've been there, give the impression of what's gone on. You know, we definitely want to get some input on that one.
And now, Tom, what's going on in September?
Well, in September, there's also Woodworking in America, the 25th to the 27th of September, and that's in Kansas City, Missouri. Mm-hmm. It's not sold out yet, but believe me, Woodworking in America gets sold out pretty quickly. So if you do want to go, I know I'm going because it's, you know, while it's getting toward the end of hurricane season and I get a little time I can get away, a lot of other folks are going to be there as well. So it's going to be in a new city for all of us, though. So I got to admit, I've never been to the Show Me State, so somebody's going to have to show me the places to go eat and have all the other fun stuff that goes on there as well. So again, just search for Woodworking in America. You can find it online. And you know what, Diami, there's something we haven't announced yet, but we have to. Early in May or mid-May, we have to do Woodworker Safety Day. Which is something that's on the calendar, and a couple of people have already asked me, well, what are you guys doing? And I'm like, So if I bring it up now during the podcast, we have to pick a day.
Absolutely. See, and my cavalier attitude was letting us skip right past it. But
you see, you and your cavalier attitude. It's always that with you, isn't it? So what we're gonna have to do is we're gonna post a little something, a little preview teaser on Woodworker Safety Day. We're probably gonna put it toward the middle of May. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna find a day. Maybe we'll talk to some of our friends out there who deal in safety items. See if we can get a couple of fine and fantabulous prizes to give out. And we're going to ask bloggers and other folks out there to talk about woodworking safety on their blogs. And this way, what we can do is we can kind of build a little bit of interest about it. It's the thing about safety is, you never really think about it. You buy the tools and you buy the wood and you buy the bits and the blades and everything. But safety is one of those things that you kind of use in like the dust goggles from like when you were in like 7th grade.
Yeah, we don't know how those cool masks like you do. Yeah,
you gotta kind of think about safety for a little bit. Those feather boards, they cost a little bit of money. It take time to make, and it's the kind of thing where you really want to think about those things before you have to spend that deductible at the hospital. I guarantee you, a pair of safety goggles probably cost a whole lot less than your emergency room deductible.
Ty, let me just ask you, when was the last time woodworking landed you in the hospital?
Wow, when was the last time woodworking landed me in the hospital? I went to the immediate care clinic when I was trimming a tree. So was that technically woodworking?
Yeah, sure. What the hell?
Yeah, so I cut my fingers with actually a hedge trimmer. So
you all right?
It's solid 11 stitches in my right index finger. So it doesn't look like Frankenfinger anymore, but boy howdy, did it smart. And the blood was great because it was all over the place. And my son just kind of like, my oldest, at the time was, Dominic was about 12 at the time. He goes, do you want me to clean it up? I said, let me get to the hospital first. Get this stitched up, and then we'll talk about cleaning, okay? So that was the last time anything fun befell me like that. So
how about you, Zac?
I prefer to keep it that way.
Well,
that's the last time.
I haven't been to the hospital for a while, but when I first started woodworking, I decided to try and chop my finger off with a chisel.
Ooh.
I learned real quick that it's not a good idea to hold the piece of wood and then chisel towards your hand.
No.
Vices are a lot better. So,
vices don't mind if you hit them.
Yeah. So, learned that lesson early. And I haven't really had any real accidents in the shop since.
Excellent.
Well, let's keep
it. And by the way, safety glasses do cost a lot less than your deductible.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes, they do.
I'm willing to bet. If you haven't paid an emergency room deductible in the past couple of years, you can probably buy a good, 8 or 10 safety glasses, quality safety glasses for the price of your
Yep. Safety glasses and a vise.
deductible. I guarantee you. Yes. And a few other items in there, too, that'll keep you safe. So, well, now that we've gone around safety and we're talking about that, and of course we'll pop up the date for Woodworker Safety Day, let's introduce Zac Higgins from the NV Woodworks, WOODWERKS.com. And you can find him on NV Woodworks, again with the E, because he's trendy that way. And Zac, it's because it's Nevada, right?
No, actually, the story behind the name, or that spelling, is I did not want to call it work.
Oh.
That's why there's an E in there.
Okay. So it wasn't work and you're from Nevada.
That's right.
Am I saying it right? I'm from New Jersey.
Pretty good. It's just not Nevada.
It's not Nevada, okay.
Not Nevada, it's Nevada.
Okay. So you're at nvwoodworks.com, and you're known for turning pens. How'd you get into that?
Actually, I was very against turning pens, but I had to take a class. Well, I went up and took a class, and it had to be turning pens. So I started there and just kind of kept going, and finally I just loved it.
Let me ask, why do you have to take a class in pens?
I wanted to take my dad to a turning class for Father's Day.
Mm-hmm.
And the only class, because we hadn't ever taken a class at this place, we had to take the intro pen class. I was pretty disappointed because at that time, turning, what I wanted to do with turning was, make table legs and furniture parts. And I was a little bit disappointed, but after taking that class, I started turning pens and doing, little things here and there. And after a while, I just kind of really got into it.
Were you a furniture builder before that?
Yeah, I used to be an appraiser, and I started woodworking back right around the time when the Wood Whisperer came out.
Okay.
I don't know what year that was, but so I started doing that kind of stuff.
It was about 8 BC.
That's right.
That's how long he's been around.
I know. So I started there, and I was just doing it on the weekends, having fun. And a fork in the road kind of came. I was going to have to leave. I kind of got fired, but I was leaving this company that I was working for, and I kind of at the time thought, I really enjoy woodworking, so I want to give it a try since I kind of have that opportunity right now. And so I just kind of started doing that, and I got into it thinking I was going to be a custom furniture builder, but I learned real quick after the first project that I was delivering finished, and the side split out.
Ooh.
And I was like, man, I'm pretty much I'm gluing it up in my customer's living room, and I was like, these big projects suck to deliver, unless they come and pick them up at the shop. It just killed me. So I kind of started focusing on smaller items and things. I have an Etsy shop, and I was going to try and just do small type of things. Maybe something like cutting boards. I never did that, but small things like that. And then pens came, right around that same time. I started kind of getting into pens, and people kept asking me, oh, can you make me one? I'll buy one, and that it just kind of transitioned into this kind of smaller gift item type stuff. And then at this point, I'm really just focusing on pens.
So is that what you're doing full time now? Is making the custom pens?
Yeah. Yep. And then with that, I started getting into the acrylic stuff, and so as part of my business, I'm also selling the blanks.
Oh, okay, that's why you're always casting so much, not just for yourself, but for the blanks you sell.
Yeah, when I got into that, actually, I really, really enjoy doing that stuff. It's, woodworking is awesome. I love woodworking, but the blanks, because you're working with colors and you can kind of design things more like just strict art in a sense,
Mm-hmm.
I found that it's just, you can make anything you want with that resin stuff. So I can make stuff and then turn it. And so it just all fed into one thing.
I saw that you made some fairly recently with Pinecones in it. Do you put a lot of non-resin items in them? And is it a form of experimentation? You're not sure what you're going to get? Or do you have an idea what a Pinecone looks like when it's cast in resin and turned before you do it?
There's a lot. Well, I generally know kind of what things are going to look like with just wood, because I put a lot of wood. Actually, being from Nevada, one of the things that I wanted to come up with was something completely Nevadan. Like no, there's no question that that's definitely from Nevada.
It's poker chip pen?
What?
Either poker chips or sand, right?
Poker chip? No, actually, sagebrush.
Oh, okay.
Sagebrush is the state flower, but for most Nevadans, they're going to say it's a weed. And it's just, it covers everywhere in the whole state of Nevada, pretty much anywhere on the kind of high desert West Coast area around here. And so it's just ubiquitous. I mean, you see it everywhere. If you go on a road trip, that's all you see is sagebrush. And it's not necessarily very pretty or anything, but it's everywhere. And so what I managed to do is it's kind of a shrub. And so what I do is I take the branches and stuff like that and then just cut them up, and then I cast those pieces in the resin for the sagebrush pens.
Cool.
So yeah, it started there with the wood with me, doing casting with that. But I've seen a lot of other people's blanks, what they do, and so I kind of have an idea if you put curly maple in it or chunks of wood or something like that. I kind of have an idea. But pine cones are another thing. I'm actually up kind of near Tahoe, and so we have tons of pine trees, and so I started collecting those and embedding them. I did know what they'd kind of look like, but after the first one that I did, I was like, wow, I'm making more of these because they look really cool once you turn them. That's the weird thing about casting is a lot of people have suggestions like, oh, you should put this in there. And the problem is if it's a really neat item in live space, I'm trying to think of an example, something that just looks cool, outside of the casting. For instance, I made a pen blank out of Captain Crunch Berries cereal.
Mm-hmm.
Get out.
Yeah, and so that seemed like it'd be a really cool idea, and it didn't turn out terrible, but the problem is when you do that, you cast it in there, then you turn it, it's not identifiable. It doesn't look like Captain Crunch. It just kind of looks like
and that's
who
how you
knows
get
what.
ants. That's how you get ants.
Yeah. So what I found is a lot of times mundane things, when you throw those in there and then turn it and it becomes a kind of a sphere or a cone shape, that's when you get really cool effects. And so with the pine cones, you're really kind of, cutting them through the middle of the pine cone, and so you see these kind of weird shapes.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are usually the better, if you're going to make a pen blank, usually that type of thing turns out really good. And so the pine cones have worked out really awesome for me.
So you're looking for something that has an interesting cross-section? Yeah,
pretty much.
Now,
a lot of times you can just put, I'm trying to think, depending on how you put, arrange things. And, when I'm casting, I'm usually doing it in a rectangular mold.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just kind of a trough of resin. And then what I do is I cut the blanks out of it. So if you just arrange things in different kind of geometries or different angles and stuff, that a lot of times turns out really cool too.
When you take your castings out of that rectangular mold and you cut it, are you cutting that in a bandsaw or a table saw or something else?
I do it on the table saw. Selling the blanks, I like to have them fairly smooth. Mm-hmm. I don't really. It's kind of a weird thing with me. It helps me to sell them because you can see, a better cut is going to allow you to kind of see what's actually going on.
That makes sense.
With the resin and all that. So for me, I do that. Now the problem is, you're taking an 1/8 inch of resin and whatever the material is for every cut. So it's kind of wasteful, but it works better for me that way. A lot of people do it on a bandsaw. So
I mean, you've got to see what you're getting into. I mean, especially if it's the first couple of times you've ever turned something, with like that embedded in resin. It's good to help somebody envision what they're going to get.
Yeah. It like I said, it helps me to understand because sometimes I have no clue until I start cutting into it. I like to experiment a lot with that stuff because, I mean, you can do anything with it, for the most part. And so I'll experiment, but I don't know what's going on. And so I don't really rough cuts don't really help me figure it out until, then you definitely have to turn it to actually see what's going on.
Do you find that you're making a lot of blanks that are typical for a custom, interesting blank, or are you making blanks that no one else makes with these different combinations?
A lot of times colors, people really like the team colors. That's been a big one for me. So I've been trying to match, using dyes and stuff like that, try and match pretty close to the colors for, I got an order for the Seahawks when the Super Bowl, Seahawks and Patriots. Got a pretty big order for those. And so, I got a color match to a certain degree, the team colors. People love those. And then, you're
it's that red, white, and black and gold. That's University of Maryland's colors. Okay, baby, got to come up with a couple of those.
What'd you red, black, and gold?
Red, white, black, and gold.
Red. That's 4 colors, Thomas. Half the rainbow.
I'm sorry, it's the 4 colors of the state flag. What do you want?
Well, I can definitely do that. Eventually, I want to have every college, NFL, and NBA, everything.
Wow.
I want to have the mixtures pretty much. And there's a lot of overlap with those. There's a lot of blues that are all the same. So it won't be that hard. But I can definitely do red, black, white, and gold already.
See, there you go. Boom, right there.
Right there.
See, all you University of Maryland fans, they're all listening right now thinking, we got it solved.
That's right.
Now, we've talked about it a bunch, but I have never turned a thing. My 2 of my sons have turned pens when they went to the woodworking shows this year. So I've seen pens being turned, but I've heard people say, well, you seem to think that the acrylics are really interesting. As a non-turner, I think the acrylics look really interesting, but I'm not a traditionalist, and I don't have to deal with how it turns. But I've heard comments about how some people will turn acrylic and not like it at all. So talk to me about the difference between acrylic and wood when you're turning and one versus the other in terms of the way it turns and what it's like.
That's actually a good point. That's a good question. In general, wood is probably, I might say, easier in a sense. I mean, some woods are really hard. So like super, super hard woods are not very fun to turn. That sagebrush stuff is super gnarly and hard. And it's not the most fun thing to turn, I wouldn't say. But acrylics you got to turn them at high speeds. You don't want to be, I literally wind my lathe up as fast as it'll go. You'll get a better cut. But there's also kind of a difference between what type of acrylic you're turning. And so I kind of mentioned at the beginning, there's most people that cast pens, do the casting themselves.
Okay.
Use epoxy, polyester resin, or polyurethane resin. Out of those 3, polyurethane resin and the brand that I use, I don't know if you want to bring that up on the show. I use Alumilite, which is pretty well known for, in the casting or pen blank world. It turns it's like a softer material.
And that's a polyurethane resin?
Yeah. Compared to epoxy and polyester resin, those 2 are pretty similar and they're fairly brittle. And so a lot of people don't like the brittleness because you can get chip out on when you're turning the pen.
Okay.
So, and I don't particularly like it either, but for the most part, it feels lagged. That's the only way that I can kind of, describe it. Things go slower. You can turn wood a lot quicker because it just kind of cuts, it shears. Those fibers are shearing, but there's no fiber. There's no strands or anything. It's all just one lump of acrylic. And so I guess that's kind of why things seem to turn a little slower on the tools.
Okay.
I don't know. There definitely is a difference. I don't particularly care personally. They both. I'm more interested in the focus of what I'm doing rather than really how it feels, I guess.
Okay.
I don't know if that makes sense, but I'm kind of I'm more into.
The product is important. The final product's important. So.
Yeah, well, I guess what I'm saying though, instead of final product, is just I'm more interested in what I'm doing rather than kind of like how it feels. Or I don't really care how it feels. I'm just watching me making the shape and converting a piece of square whatever into some type of shape, whether it be a pen or whatever.
You're happy to be turning, be it resin or wood. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, another thing I've seen you do is the resin impregnated wood.
Mm-hmm.
Where does that fit between the natural wood and the acrylic?
I'm guessing you're talking like the stabilizing.
Yes, I'm sorry. Is that not something I do? So if I'm using the wrong terminology, please let me know.
No, I'm just my terminology. I kind of differentiate it that way. The stabilizing is something that you sometimes have to do. If you're using, let's say, like spalted maple, the spalting areas can be really punky. and it's kind of soft, spongy kind of material. Mm-hmm. So what you're doing with stabilizing is you're just trying to harden up anything like that. The other thing that I use it for that's useful is I stabilize all the sagebrush chunks that I put in there when I'm casting. And the advantage that you have with that is it doesn't, it turns better is one thing. You don't get tear out or anything like that usually when you're stabilizing wood. The other thing that benefits me when I'm casting is if you impregnate the wood with, it's basically, it's a resin. It basically kind of plasticizes the insides of it. The thing is, you're getting rid of all the air, and so those things don't float when I'm trying to cast them.
Oh, okay.
So that's kind of a big advantage for me. But stabilizing, people use it a lot for different things. I mean, I think that Scott Meek uses, it's basically, I think, stabilized wood on his planes now because it doesn't move.
I know he's using the same wood that, who's the tool maker that uses it? Blue Spruce?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's using the same wood as Blue Spruce, and I thought it was pressure injected, but I guess yours is too, because you do it in the pressure pot, right?
Well, they
you do it in the vacuum
slightly different, but it's pretty much the same thing. I guess there's commercial applications where you put it under such high pressure that it just forces it into the where the air would be in the cellular structure. Mm-hmm. What I do is I use a vacuum chamber and just suck the air out first. Then when you repressurize it, it just the liquid flows into those spots before the air. So it fills it before the air can get in there, and then you bake it and harden it. So I do know that there are like industrial applications, and they may be getting their wood done that way, but it's pretty much the same. It's the same thing for the most part.
Right.
You're just filling those airways with plastic or something. It works really good though. The other thing is it kind of helps to. Well, with pens, it is kind of, it could be a wood movement issue. You don't really want the wood moving under a finish too much. I haven't seen any issues with that with any of my pens, whether I have stabilized wood or not. But, that is a thought you could have or a reason to stabilize it. And then the other thing that I'm trying to kind of get into is the dyed wood. I don't know if you've seen that, where it's basically dyed throughout the wood. You're not just putting a coat of dye on the outside.
Are you dyeing it in the vacuum chamber the same way you're stabilizing it?
Yeah, you put it in the vacuum chamber, and the way that the stabilizing works, you put it in a vacuum chamber, fill the chamber, put your wood in there, but fill the chamber with the stabilizing resin, and then put it under vacuum or pull vacuum on it. That's going to pull all the air out, and then, like I said, you release that vacuum and it fills the insides of the wood with stabilizing resin. If you dye the stabilizing resin, then you're basically dyeing the wood from, kind of the inside out.
Okay. Do you just add a couple drops of like a trans tint or something, or is there a special dye you need to use?
I use dyes that are sold by Alumilite.
Okay, so it's all
proprietary. Okay, I got you.
Well, the reason is because I think you can use trans tint, but the problem is it doesn't bake into the resin, and that's the advantage that the Alumilite resin or the Alumilite dye has. It, like when you bake the resin, when you heat it up, or if you're casting, it actually bakes into the resin when it's under heat. So that's kind of one of the advantages, is it's not gonna, there's no fading. It's baked into the resin, basically.
Okay.
So that's pretty fun stuff, yeah. The other thing is you can do double dyeing wood, which that's what I'm really trying, dyeing wood's really not that hard. You just add dye. This double dyeing process, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, but somehow you dye it once, but you don't put it under pressure or bake it.
Okay.
And then you go through the whole steps of doing the normal stabilizing, where you pull the vacuum, bake the resin and everything. And so what you end up with is this wood has two different colors of dye, depending on I think it depends on the structure of the wood and grain. It really works really good on burls, where you have that grain going weird directions.
Is it that the wood is dyed one color and the resin you impregnate it with is dyed another color? So you're filling all the pores with a different color than the wood is dyed?
No, you're doing both, basically. The dye does seep into the wood. So you're dyeing the wood for the most part, but the resin inside would be dyed as well, hardened. But you're talking about really small, we're talking cellular structure on the inside. So it's not like there's a lot of resin there. Okay. You're not seeing red. If you dyed it red, you're not seeing a bunch of red resin because it's so small.
Cool. Now, Zac, we can go on for a while with your pens, but there's also some other things you're doing as well. Like your homemade carbide tools. What's that all about, and how's that working out for you?
Well, I wanted to. The story with that is I wanted to get a circle cutter carbide tool, and I didn't want to pay $130. So I was like, okay, let me go to YouTube. So there's a bunch of people out there that have tutorials and all that kind of stuff on it, and so it's really there's nothing spectacular about those tools. It's a piece of maybe it's stainless steel for the bar part. I actually just use cold rolled steel, so cheap steel. Piece of wood, a ferrule. I use a coupler, copper pipe coupler for those. Okay. And then just a carbide cutter. And so I just decided, I'm just going to make it. And so it turned out that cost me under $20 to make my own.
And how's it work out?
It worked good. The only issue is I think I need to move the cutter a little bit forward where, the position on the end. Mm-hmm. I wanted to make one that I could turn bowls with. So it's a pretty big cutter. And I tried doing some stuff with it on smaller wood, wood turnings. And they're just the whole thing's too big. So I need to make some smaller ones, but I can do that. It's pretty fun. I didn't really go into it thinking I was going to sell them or any, it was more just kind of for me. But a bunch of people have asked if I'm making them, and so I'm going to probably make a few more just so I've only made 2, and so that I don't particularly want to sell things that I don't, I'm like, oh yeah, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'll sell you one.
Fake it till you make it.
No, Zac, you've made dozens of them, and they're very successful.
Well, hopefully, a few months, I can probably say that, and I'll feel a little bit more comfortable. I'd rather just not make money up front. Get a little bit of feel comfortable with what I'm doing, and then that way I won't have to deal with returns down the road.
Yeah, happy customers are better customers. Yes, they are. Now, speaking about happy customers, you've also been doing weekly YouTube updates. How's that going?
Oh man, YouTube has been amazing. I got to honestly say that I've been kind of here and there. I started woodworking when Mark started his Wood Whisperer stuff. And I've been kind of following that and, kind of involved with people online doing that stuff for a long time. And I just recently really immersed myself in kind of like online woodworking stuff. And YouTube had always been an idea, but I really wasn't comfortable getting behind a camera. And so eventually I just started doing it. And I am amazed at the YouTube community. It is just, the people on there are very supportive. It's just been fun. And so I'm, at this point, the only issue I have with YouTube is I need to get better at doing the videos. It takes me a long time to do them, but that has been fun. And so the weekly updates was something I came up with because I'm on Twitter quite a bit, and I do kind of daily or, if I'm working on something, I usually try and take a picture and share it, do whatever. So Twitter gets a lot of what I'm actually doing daily. But YouTube, I just kind of started doing casting because I started getting to the point where I really know what I'm doing with casting, and I wanted to share it because I really enjoy it. Mm-hmm. So I started the channel up and kind of started just really hitting home on casting videos, how to do this and different aspects of it. And then it occurred to me that, the people on YouTube that follow my channel have no clue what I'm doing necessarily on a weekly basis. I can say that, I got a new pressure pot or I did this, but nobody really sees what I'm actually working on. And so that was kind of the idea for that. And it's gone good so far.
Good. Well, what's your YouTube channel?
NV Woodworks.
And with the E in it, right? Works?
With the E. Yeah, nice. There's definitely never any work going on. So.
There's no work. I'm telling you. That's
always
the way it works. It's got to do that. Okay, well, Zac, we've got 5 questions for you that we normally ask our guests. And we'd like to see if you could just give us just a very brief kind of Reader's Digest summary of for each of the topics. So first of all, how'd you get into woodworking in the first place?
I got into woodworking because I wanted to make office furniture. The funny thing is I got into woodworking and I never made that furniture.
But you also got out of an office.
Yeah, got out of that too.
Wow, you really got out of everything, didn't you? Okay.
That's right. I found woodworking and I got out of everything.
Nice.
Yeah.
It just changed your outlook.
That's right.
Zac, what's your favorite tool?
Right now, the lathe has got to be my favorite tool. Close second, I would say, is my saw stop, table saw. That thing is a workhorse.
Nice. Okay, who do you think in woodworking has influenced you the most?
I'd have to say Mark Spagnolo. When I got into it, he was pretty much the guiding light. Close second to him was Matt, because he was, Matt Vanderlist. He was doing it first. But Mark's videos really, he pretty much taught me half of what I know about woodworking. So I'd definitely go with him.
Nice.
As you've learned to do your woodworking and grown as a woodworker, what's been your biggest stumbling block?
Impatience, definitely. I want to kind of get to the end. Like I said, I started thinking I was going to be a custom furniture builder, and I'm too impatient to work on a big project like that and try and sell it. So I keep stepping down, but if you break it into smaller parts, then I'm usually all right. If mentally you just break it to the small things, then I can kind of keep with it.
Compared to a highboy, a chair, a pen is kind of instant gratification.
Yeah, very instant.
Oh, look, I'm done. Yeah, I'll start another one. You can't do that with high boys. Yeah,
Nope.
It doesn't work that way. Okay, and how has the internet influenced your work?
Greatly. When I got into it, and there was videos and there was podcasts, and you have all these channels that you can get information. I constantly try and imagine how it was before that, because that's really all that I knew. And I'm like, so you joined a club, maybe a local club, and you went there. And you had the magazines. I still read the magazines, but, between magazines, books, DVDs, the internet is just, again, I'm impatient. Instant gratification. If you want to learn how to cut a dovetail, you can find 5,000 ways to do it in, one quick Google search. So greatly, I don't think I would be, I wouldn't call myself necessarily accomplished, but, I'm pretty decent in the shop at this point at woodworking, and there's no way, if the internet wasn't around, I'd still be on the drill press trying to figure out how to cut a hole on it.
I think a lot of us would be that way.
Yeah.
And Zac, with that, I want to thank you very much for coming on tonight. Now,
thank you.
Again, where can people find you? I just want to go. We'll give you one more opportunity to plug your site.
Well, my website is under construction, and it has been for months. But you can go there, and you can contact me through it at nbwoodworks.com. My YouTube channel, I'm getting to the point where I'm doing about at least a video a week, maybe two. So YouTube, just search for NB Woodworks. You'll find me there. I'm on Twitter and Facebook also. That's pretty much it. Google Plus.
Sweet. All right. Well, hey, if you haven't seen Zac's work, you gotta look it up, because I'm telling you, it is something to see. Zac, thank you so much for coming on tonight.
Well, thank you guys. I had a really good time.
Hey, it was a blast.
Yeah, we're happy to have you.
Please say the word Nevada.
That's right. We're always learning stuff, and all the Commonwealth states too.
And we learned that there are 4 Commonwealths in the United States as well. So this is great. So actually, that'll be the question for next broadcast. Somebody tell us what the 4 Commonwealths are. So just let us know. And when we're done being Mr. History, that about wraps it up for today's show. If you're missing us already, you can subscribe to the show on iTunes. Just search for the Modern Woodworkers Association. Once you're subscribed, you'll be sure to never miss another exciting episode. And while you're at iTunes, please leave us a 5-star ranking. Even if you don't think we deserve it, just do it. Because it helps other people find us more easily.
And if you want to find out more about the Modern Woodworkers Association, be sure to visit modernwoodworkersassociation.com, follow the MWA on Twitter at MWA_national. You could like the MWA on Facebook or circle Modern Woodworkers Association on Google+. While you're there, join the MWA Google+ community for project sharing, discussion, and loads of woodworking banter. I am Diami Plotke of penultimatewoodshop.com. I am at Diami Plotke on the Twitters.
And I'm Resident Shop Monkey, Tom Iovino of Tom'sWorkbench.com and at Tom's Workbench on Twitter. Until we see you again, and right now my eyes are closed, so I can't even see you now, we wish you all happy sawdust. Thanks for listening.